Oh, it's so nice to see you here. Yeah. Finally, it's been like years and years.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 13, Text 51. ātmādi-stamba-paryantair mūrti-madbhiś cara-acaraiḥ nṛtya-gītādy-anekārhaiḥ pṛthak upāsitāḥ ātma-ādi-stamba-paryantair. From Lord Brahmā to the insignificant living entity. Mūrti-madbhiḥ, assuming some form. Cara-acaraiḥ, both the moving and the non-moving. nṛtya-gīta-ādi-aneka-arhaiḥ, by many varied means of worship, such as dancing and singing. Pṛthak, differently. Upāsitāḥ, who were being worshipped. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. All beings, both moving and non-moving, from the four-headed Lord Brahmā down to the most insignificant living entity, had taken forms and were differently worshipping those viṣṇu-mūrtis, according to their respective capacities, with various means of worship, such as dancing and singing. Purport. Innumerable living entities are engaged in different types of worship of the Supreme, according to their abilities and karma. But everyone is engaged. Jiver Swarupai Krishna Nitya Das. There is no one who is not serving. Therefore, the Mahabhagavat, the topmost devotee, sees everyone as being engaged in the service of Krishna. Only himself does he see as not engaged. We have to elevate ourselves from a lower position to a higher position. And the topmost position is that of direct service in Vrindavan. But everyone is engaged in service. Denial of the service of the Lord is Maya. Ekale Ishwar Krishna aur sab nṛtya. Jare jaiche nachaye, se taiche kore nitya. Only Krishna is the supreme master, and all others are his servants. As Krishna desires, everyone dances according to his tune. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 5:142. There are two kinds of living entities, the moving and the non-moving. Trees, for example, stand in one place, whereas ants move. Brahma saw that all of them, down to the smallest creature, had assumed different forms and were accordingly engaged in the service of Lord Vishnu. one receives a form according to the way one worships the Lord. In the material world, the body one receives is guided by the demigods. This is sometimes referred to as the influence of the stars. As indicated in Bhagavad-Gita 3:27 by the words prakrite kriyamanani, according to the laws of nature, one is controlled by the demigods. All living entities are serving Krishna in different ways, but when they are Krishna conscious, their service is fully manifest. As a flower in the bud gradually fructifies and yields its desired aroma and beauty, so when a living entity comes to the platform of Krishna consciousness, the beauty of his real form comes into full blossom. That is the ultimate beauty and the ultimate fulfillment of desire. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Viṣṇu-padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutle Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshatarine. So this is chapter 51. This chapter ends after 64 slokas. The circumstances under which Srila Prabhupada was translating this particular chapter were exceptional. This particular book, you'll find it on Srila Prabhupada's bed, because the first and the second volumes of 10th Canto had been already printed by BBT. And when Srila Prabhupada came back here from Bombay, the first time he came back was from Rishikesh. And at that time, Srila Prabhupada, everyone was so happy to see Prabhupada unexpectedly returning here. But when he entered his room and sat at his desk, and all the devotees, the Vrindavan residents, came to see Prabhupada, he announced to them that he had come to Vrindavan to leave his body. And he was no longer going to eat or drink, and no one should try to force him. So that was way back a few months earlier. It might have been May. But then while Prabhupada was refusing to eat, finally the devotees, out of their intense love, convinced him that, Srila Prabhupada, your work isn't finished. You haven't completed translating Srimad Bhagavatam yet. Please don't leave us now. Stay with us another 7-8 years so you can finish your work for your Guru Maharaj. So Srila Prabhupada then agreed. He told the devotees to bring him something to eat. Tejas had just brought strawberries from Delhi, which was a great delicacy. We never saw them in Vrindavan in those days. Prabhupada ate the strawberries, he had some juice, immediately began discoursing with the devotees, and everything looked bright. But Srila Prabhupada, because of his nature of every moment not wanting to waste, he felt that he was rotting here in Vrindavan. And he wanted, as soon as he had the slightest bit of strength from a little bit of eating, although he hadn't eaten for months, his hands and feet were so swollen, he wanted to go and preach again. And he made a whole world tour again, after 14 times traveling the world. He wanted to go to London and see all of his devotees in Europe. He wanted to go to New York. He wanted to set up Varnashram in Gita Nagari. Then he wanted to go to New Vrindavan, Los Angeles, finally Hawaii, where he would continue his translation work. So Prabhupada had a master plan how he was going to use the next few years to complete his translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. And as we all know, Prabhupada only got as far as London. In London again, Prabhupada suddenly informed the devotees, "It's time for me to leave my body, take me back." But there was a promise that Prabhupada had made, and that was to Radha Rasa Bihari, that he would build them a temple. So he said, before I go to Vrindavan this time, I want to go to Bombay and open the temple. So all the devotees who had come with him to London, they all came with Prabhupada to Bombay, and they called Bhakti Charu Swami, who didn't have his passport at the time, he couldn't go. And Prabhupada insisted that he stay in his new quarters, and he wanted to push, just as Prabhupada had pushed Sarabi to complete this temple, he wanted to push Sarabi to complete the temple before he left this world. But Sarabi, being very pragmatic, an architect, a designer, he knew it was absolutely impossible. It would take at least 8 more months, 6 to 8 months, just as with this temple. So Prabhupada, he didn't expect that he was going to last that long, and he left it in the hands of the devotees in Bombay and came back here. Now when Prabhupada reached Mathura Junction, he came by train. They wanted to give Prabhupada a wheelchair. Prabhupada rejected it. No, Prabhupada wasn't going to be treated like an invalid. So they carried him and they brought him to his house. And Prabhupada was still strong enough when he started this last chapter. Just as Prabhupada didn't know how long he would live when he started the translation of the first canto. So he put everything into that first canto. If you read the introduction, if you read all the purports, that first canto has the entire thesis of Krishna consciousness within it. Even if you just read that, you've learned everything. So similarly, just like when a person is about to leave this world, they might have some last words for the loved ones. So Srila Prabhupada put all of his last words into this one book, these 64 slokas. And we can find Prabhupada reminiscing all of the risks that he took, all of the desires he had, and not only his own desires being the personified Bhagavat, but Krishna in this particular pastime. Prabhupada and his desires, as we heard yesterday, that by the sweet glancing, the pure glancing of the reddish eyes of the Lord, that increases the spiritual desires of the devotee to serve Krishna. So Prabhupada's desires were increasing more and more. But because this particular chapter is dealing with the Sakyaras, Krishna is still in Kumara Lila, he's still in infancy, he's still drinking milk from his mother, being cuddled and fondled and bathed by her. Once he enters Poganda, he doesn't allow Mother Yashoda to do all that. He wants his friends to do that. But this is Kumara Lila still. And they're picnicking, they're frolicking, they're wandering through the forest here in Vrindavan onto the shores of Jamuna. And Prabhupada's desires became stronger and stronger to do those things with Krishna again. So what happened was, that year, in the middle of Shravan, it was the Srila Sanatana Goswami's disappearance day, the first day of Chaturmas, was July 1st, very early, because there hadn't been a Purushottam Mas for 3 years. Halfway through Shravan, the Purushottam Mas came, until August 14th, something like that. So that pushed all of the festivals very, very late. November 14th, it was just 2 days after Govardhan Puja. Govardhan Puja was, on the 11th, so it was 3 days later. Diwali had just happened. So while Prabhupada was translating, and we're just a few days away from when Prabhupada leaves us, he suddenly informs the devotees on the 10th of November that I want to do Govardhan Parikrama because Govardhan Puja was coming in 2 days. Take me. And the devotees went into total anxiety. They consulted the Kaviraj, they consulted the Godbrother, everyone. How can he can't even turn over himself in the bed. You move him the wrong way, his body is bruised. There's no muscles left in his body even. Nothing. Just the skin and the bones. How painful it was. And the Kaviraj said he had never seen anyone like Srila Prabhupada. How he was able to tolerate that pain and still translating. So Prabhupada began this chapter when he stayed upstairs in his upstairs room. If anyone has gone there, that's where Prabhupada used to translate in the middle of the night while we were all sleeping. And he started there at his desk, translating the first slokas. But as he became weaker and weaker, from there, you'll see Prabhupada's rocking chair upstairs. They carved handles onto the ends of the rocking chairs, and they would carry Prabhupada every morning down the thin little staircase, scraping their hands against the walls to carry Prabhupada. They would never tell Prabhupada how difficult it was. They would bring Prabhupada here, he would take darshan, and then Prabhupada would watch the Gurukul boys dancing as the devotees had kirtan every morning. But then Prabhupada became too weak. So he had to resort to living downstairs. He could only lie in his bed. He couldn't even attend to be taken anywhere for the call of nature. Everything had to be done in the bed. That's how weak he was. But still, even while in the bed, one devotee sat on the bed and held the microphone right next to Prabhupada's mouth. And still it was so faint. Pradyumna sat on the side of the bed and read the different tikas to Srila Prabhupada in the Bengali and Sanskrit. And Prabhupada continued in that condition to give us these purports in this book. So Prabhupada wanted to go on Govardhan Parikrama and have a picnic with all the devotees. Just as Krishna and the cowherd boys are doing here in this day. Prabhupada was so absorbed in this pastime, we can't understand, because this was his mood. When he went to America, he hadn't even reached America yet, he was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and Prabhupada talks about this, how the boat was just like a little matchbox, and you only saw water on all sides. There was no way you could get out of that ocean by yourself. But because the captain, he had maps, he could see according to the stars and the moon where he was. He could tell Prabhupada that, 20 kilometers from here is Italy, and over there is Morocco and Tunisia. The navigator knew everything, although Prabhupada only saw water in all directions. So as Prabhupada was going through, seeing water everywhere, Prabhupada, with the same mood, he was remembering, when can I return again to frolic with you in the forests of Vrindavan, as we steal each other's lunch bags, as we enjoy each other's lunches together, as we have our picnic together. So this was what Prabhupada was yearning to return to. And now Prabhupada, he was in this Leela, and he wanted to, even at the sacrifice of his own life, he wanted to go to Govardhan and have a picnic with the devotees, and at night he wanted to sleep under the trees, He said, I know, it was cold, November, just like it is now. Who wants to sleep outside in this cold? Prabhupada said, no, we'll sleep under the trees. It's very nice. In the daytime, we get the sunshine, and at night under the trees, we sleep. Everything will be fine. Nothing to worry about, no risk at all. And the devotees were having heart attacks. Prabhupada, how can we let you do that? It's suicide. And then Prabhupada, he said, yes, it's suicide. This is also suicide. I'm lying here rotting. That's another form of suicide. So this suicide or that suicide. And then he said, Marika. Marika is how Prabhupada pronounced Maricha, the demon who was defeated by Ram in Ramayana. And he was thrown so far away. Maricha was so afraid of Ram coming after him that Maricha became a sage and was just sitting in meditation, always thinking of Ram, when will he come to kill me? And then Ravana, when Ravana was instigated, because when Ram and Lakshman killed actually it was just Ram himself, he killed all the 40,000 of Kara's followers. One Rakshasa escaped, and he flew back to tell Ravana what happened. And when he told Ravana about the beauty of Sita, Ravana immediately became ready to kidnap Sita. He went to Maricha the first time. He said, you're the only one, you have to be the one to lure Ram away from Sita so I can kidnap her. And Maricha said, you don't know, you're inviting your own death. Who is your enemy? Who has given you this advice? Go home, live happily with your wives in Sri Lanka. So Ravana went home, but then Surpanika came, and she goaded him. She humiliated him. Look what this Ram has done to your own sister. Have you no shame? So then Ravana couldn't take it anymore. He said to Maricha, he went back to the Himalayas, he said, Maricha, either you do as I tell you, or you die at my hands. So Maricha, both sides, just like Prabhupada. Either I get killed by Ravana, or I get killed by Ram. Let me choose Ram. So Prabhupada told the devotees, both sides is suicide. Either I lie here and rot, or I go on Tirtha Yatra. And I die a glorious death in the Holy Land, seeing the Tirtha Yatras, just as Balaram did. He traveled everywhere, so I also want to travel. So the devotees didn't know what to do. They tried to humor Prabhupada. Yes, Prabhupada, we'll all go with you. If we meet any intelligent people, we need a scientist, so Swarup Damodar, he better come with us. If we meet any rich people, we'll need to make life members. Giriraj better come with us. And we need a leader. Yes, probably. Yes, Lokanath, he's the leader. So they were making all these plans. And I had seen Prabhupada do this before when he wanted to start the World Sankirtan Party by ship all over the world. All the leaders, yes, I know how to run ships. I worked on it, that was Brahmananda. Yes, I know how. I also know. Yeah, we'll all go with you, Srila Prabhupada. So then the devotees, seeing that they couldn't break Prabhupada's determination, they said, all right, Prabhupada wants to go, we'll all go with him. But not everyone was convinced, especially Bhakti Swami. So he made a secret plan, because there were two camps. Hansaduta was the leader of one camp, saying, Prabhupada, he knows what's best for him. He says this Tirtha Yatra will cure him. We must take him. It doesn't matter what the Kaviraj says. Prabhupada knows better than the doctor. Prabhupada said, we are not Dr. Das, we are Krishna Das. And then the other camp, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Bhavananda Goswami, the other camp was very big. Everyone in the room, 30, 40 devotees. Prabhupada, we can't let you die like this. You haven't finished your work. You have to go on. The doctor's giving you medicine to build your muscles. We have to cooperate. You're drinking half a liter of milk every day now. You couldn't drink anything before. Please, just wait a few days, 2 weeks. Just wait 2 weeks, and then we'll take you. So Bhakti-chara Swami, he knew that Prabhupada's determination could not be broken. So he made a plan. Prabhupada said, he saw the two camps. He said, call Krishnadas Babaji. He will decide. So this was the trick. All right, Krishnadas Babaji, they call him, they bring him from Madhav Maharaj's ashram. Oh, you want to go and go Vrindavan? Yes, you come with me. Yes, we'll go together. We'll bathe together in Radha. Yes, he was completely, yes, we'll do it together. The God brothers, Prabhupada, I want to feed Krishnadas Babaji a little prasadam. Yes, you take him for prasadam. And he had him in his grips. And he told Krishnadas Babaji, we're dying from anxiety. You have to convince Prabhupada not to go. So then Krishnadas Babaji went back. He said, no, it's not possible. So Prabhupada said, all right, if you say, and look, all the devotees are in so much anxiety. So the Prabhupada, he decided at that time, I cannot put my devotees into so much anxiety. Look at all they've done for me. So this takes us back again to the Ram Leela, because there's so much comparison in this. There was another time when the devotees, great devotees, Hanuman, Angada, Sugriva had sent, now who did Ram have to help him? He had some monkeys, he had some bears, and he had some baboons. And he was playing the part of a completely devastated husband, trying to find his wife who had been kidnapped. And these were, in the middle of the jungles, these were the only help that he had. So Sugriva decides to send all the monkeys and bears and baboons in all directions. He gave them 1 month to come back to find Sita. He said, anyone who comes back late, they'll be executed by me. So Hanuman and his group, all the monkeys, everyone said, we put your faith in Hanuman. We know that Ravana went south, so we're sending Hanuman and Angada are the strongest party to the south. They searched everywhere for Sita, couldn't find her. They overstayed 6 weeks, and they reached the shore of the ocean. Angada decided, if we go back, Sugriva's going to kill us. Better we sit here and just starve to death. So then, while they're sitting there not eating anything, they're remembering that yes, Jatayu, he also was unsuccessful and he gave up his life. Now, it so happened that in the mountain nearby was another vulture. His name was Sampati. Sampati's wings had been cut off. And he heard them talking, that they were planning to fast till death. And he walked down the mountain, and he said, finally, after thousands of years, I'm going to feast. As each one dies, I'll have a feast. So he sat there waiting, and he heard them mention Jatayu, how Jatayu had died trying to kill Ravana. He was unsuccessful, but he used everything within his power, his wings, his talons, his beak, to try to overcome Ravana. Ravana chopped off his wings, and he died. And then Ram cremated him. When Sampati heard the name of Jatayu, he started to cry. He went to the men, the monkeys. He said, Jatayu, that's my younger brother. He's dead. Oh, I haven't seen him for so long. Then he tells the story how when they were young and very bold, they wanted to fly in the course of the sun. They flew up near the sun, and Jatayu, being the younger brother, the heat was too intense for him. So Sampati covered him with his wings. That's how his wings got burnt. He fell down to the ground because his wings were burnt off. And Jatayu, as a young little vulture, flew away. And they hadn't seen each other for 8,000 years. Now, Sampati, he went to a sage and begged him, please, make my wings grow back. And the sage says, no, I will not, I can do it, but I won't do it now, because you will play a very important role in Ram's Leela when he comes here. You have to wait 8,000 years. So what role did he play? No one knew where Sita was. No one knew where Ravan lived. He told them, because vultures, each living entity, as we're reading here, each living entity has a particular way of worshiping the Lord by their singing, by their dancing, and according to their mode of worship, they get a particular body. Each species has an Achinta Shakti. Now, the Achinta Shakti of the vulture is they can see things, especially dead bodies, from hundreds of miles away. That's their Achinta Shakti, their vision. So he said, I can't fly, but I know where Sita is. I can see 800 miles away, Ram's Lanka. And he has kept Sita in the Ashok garden. And when Ravan was flying with Sita, she was calling out, Ram, Lakshman, save me. So you go there and you will find Sita. As soon as he gave that message to Hanuman and Angada and the other Vanaras, suddenly 2 wings sprouted out of his body and he flew away. He had done his service. So this so-called suicide, when a devotee chooses to give up their life because they feel remorse that they couldn't fulfill the order of the Supreme Lord, this is very common amongst the pure devotees. It's not an ordinary type of giving up one's life. So Srila Prabhupada, he was prepared to give up his life by going on Tirtha Yatra in a glorious way. He said, you just consider it civil suicide. Civil suicide is like when one takes sannyas. They're considered dead, but actually they've gone for preaching. They have a new life, their third birth. So Prabhupada wanted that freedom. He said, you let me do this at the end of my life. Yes, Prabhupada, we want you to do it. We want to go with you. We'll have a whole party. But just wait a few weeks until you get a little strength. So when Prabhupada saw how much anxiety the devotees were in, he said, Tamal Krishna, he's my right arm. And Bhavananda, he's my left arm. And then tears came to his eyes. He said, Bhavananda, you don't want me to go? You suffered so much in Mayapur for me. How can I disobey what you want? So I will stay. And then all the devotees were so happy. But that was November 11th. Prabhupada, as soon as he decided to stay, the devotees were in ecstasy. And you have to remember, no one outside of the entourage that was taking care of Prabhupada heard anything. We didn't have electronics in those days. We had a little tape recorder, was taping whatever Prabhupada said. But those transcriptions took years for us to receive. This book, although when Srila Prabhupada was translating, we would get a Srimad Bhagavatam new volume, about 1 per year. This book took 3 years. 1980 is the copyright. We were completely starved of all of Srila Prabhupada's final words for the devotees. No one knew what Prabhupada had put into this book. So this particular chapter is so sacred to the devotees. They sent this advanced copy. It's all special paper, specially printed. No other volume has only one chapter in it, because they didn't know what was going to happen after, who was going to do the translations. So they printed this, and they sent it here to be offered to Prabhupada in his samadhi, in his home. We kept it on his bed. You can see the pictures. In those days, we didn't have the security. We didn't have the grills. So one day a monkey came in, looked like something interesting. He took it off of the bed and started chewing it up. You can see here the monkey, right? So this book we've tried to keep very carefully all these years. It's been now 44 years. Keeping right next to where Prabhupada entered Samadhi. But each one of us, just as Ram, he only had the Vanaras to help him. Srila Prabhupada, in order to carry out the order of his spiritual master, you see these early pictures of Prabhupada in America. For instance, when he was leading the kirtans at Hippie Hill, Srila Prabhupada was the only civilized human being in the whole picture. His followers were worse, lower, mlechas, yavanas. These were the assistants that Lord Krishna sent to Srila Prabhupada to help him carry out the order of his spiritual master. And each one of us knows of Prabhupada's disciples absolutely no qualification whatsoever except for Srila Prabhupada's mercy. He instilled us with whatever had to be done. He put us on the judge's seat with no qualification, and we had to become the judges. Nothing, zero qualification. But because Prabhupada had the determination to carry out his spiritual master's orders, to preach Krishna consciousness in the Western countries, whatever was sent by Krishna to help him, he used that. He used us. And for that reason only, there's a pinch of worth in any of our lives. This goes on it's not that the next generation is, yes, you're much better than we were. But that first generation, zero qualification for spiritual life. But because we followed the process given by Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, where did he get that process? Directly from his spiritual master. He only changed according to time and circumstance, but the sadhana, the process, was exactly the same, untouched. So by the special mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we have been able to receive the Srimad Bhagavatam up to 10th canto, chapter 13, from Prabhupada's lotus mouth. Now the first time, for instance, this morning, this is my request, the quotation that Dharmama read this morning was from 1967. When he was reading it, I thought, oh, this sounds like 1977, when Prabhupada was about to leave. No, 1967, Prabhupada had his stroke, and he had his notice from the Supreme Lord. You don't have much time. You could go at any time. So what did Prabhupada do at that time? He stopped all activities, and he feared that he would not be able to complete up to the 10th canto. And we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam in preparation for the Krishna Lila in 10th canto. The 2 cantos after that are summaries and embellishments of the previous 10 cantos, genealogical lines of the kings and things like that. But the crest jewel of Srimad Bhagavatam, we all know, is the 10th canto. So Srila Prabhupada stopped all activities. He went to his world headquarters in Los Angeles, 1967. He sat in an apartment and he translated every single sloka of the 10th canto for us. And that is the Krishna book. Now that Krishna book, if you compare the Krishna book, each paragraph with the Srimad Bhagavatam, what Prabhupada had translated up to the 13th chapter, it is exactly the same. And that means we can very safely study the entire 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam simply by reading this Krishna book. That's how important it is. So if we have any trepidation about translations from the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, though they tried their best to follow exactly as Prabhupada's, his method was, he had, you can see in Prabhupada's house, these big red volumes in Bengali. The Bengali tikas were there, 6 tikas were there from all of the previous acharyas. And Prabhupada would read those tikas, and according to present day, he would make his own Bhaktivedanta purports for our benefit, according to what we would be able to practice and understand. So the followers of Srila Prabhupada who carried on the translation work, they did the exact same thing. And as far as possible, they followed in Prabhupada's footsteps to give us the remainder chapters and cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So here we have today a very sweet description of how all the living entities are engaged in Sankirtan, in Kirtan Ras, worshiping the Supreme Lord, that's the Vishnu forms of the Lord, according to their particular capacities. Now, in my own personal life, one day I was sitting meditating, chanting Om. I hadn't heard about Krishna yet. I had read Bhagavad-Gita, chanting Om, and when I opened my eyes, I saw that all the trees, they were worshiping the Lord with their branches spread upwards. This is how the trees worship. Their branches, their leaves, everything is worshiping Surya Narayan, because they can't live without the sunlight. Nor can we, nor can any living entity live without the sunlight. Then I realized at that time, just my own personal realization, that all the living entities, they're worshiping the Supreme Lord according to their capacities. And my capacity, what is my capacity? So then Krishna had me meet the devotees, and I understood, yes, my capacity is we have to preach this Krishna consciousness because we're human beings. We can speak. So each one of us, according to our svabhav, and there are 2 types of svabhav, we'll read about that later. We have our svabhav according to our material association, the 3 modes of material nature. And we think, well, I'm a Brahmin, I'm a Kshatriya nature, all I can do is artistic work, I have a Sudra nature. This is our material svabhav. But when we associate with the pure devotees, then we attain our adhyatmic svabhav. And that is our rasa with Krishna, our eternal svabhav. Now, how do we learn that svabhav? For the Mayavadis and the materialists, they follow the path of knowledge called aroha. That means unless they can understand it with their teeny pea-sized brain, they won't accept it. But the devotees of the Lord, they follow the principle of attaining knowledge called avaroha. Ava is the same as the word avatar. It's descending, the descending knowledge. So when we read the Srimad Bhagavatam and the other books that Srila Prabhupada has given us, that is all avaroha divya gyan. It's not coming from Srila Prabhupada's interpretations. It's not coming from any created being. Lord Brahmā also, we read, he is a created being. He's called Aja because he wasn't born from any normal mother and father, but he was born from a lotus. And a lotus is also material. So in this chapter, when Brahmā, he tries to trick Krishna, he's trying to have some fun, Brahmā himself is completely illusioned by the Lord's Yogamaya potency. And we'll learn in the next few verses coming up, how Krishna even took mercy. He's the supreme living entity in this universe. Even he was bewildered. Even Lord Shiva is bewildered. Even Narayan, he is looking for an opportunity to have darshan of Lord Krishna. So no one in this universe is superior to Lord Krishna. And we get that information by studying Srila Prabhupada's books, not by trying to understand with our own teeny brains. As Brahmā, here in the middle of his illusion, are these them? Are those these? Is he taking them every time I come over here? Is he pulling them out of the cave and putting them back? What is Krishna doing? He couldn't understand Krishna's potency. And Krishna took mercy on him. And he removed all of the Yogamaya. And there he was, standing again, just as before, a little, of course he was younger because he attained the stages faster, because he was the son of the king of Brajaraj. So standing there with the dripping between his fingers, left hand, eating with his left hand. Now this day was very special because when Balaram comes with all the boys, Krishna being the younger brother, he has to behave himself, otherwise Balaram's going to get on his case. But when Balaram doesn't come, he can fool around with the boys all he wants. He's eating with his left hand. He's grabbing the food out of their mouths, grabbing their necks so they can't swallow it because they say, oh, this is so good. All right, you can't eat it, I'm going to take it. Grabs their necks so they can't swallow. He pulls it out of their mouth and he eats it. These things he can only do when Balaram's not around. He can't do that otherwise. Big brother. So this is a very special day for Krishna and the boys. They have unrestricted joyfulness together. And here is Brahmā, tears in his eyes. Now there's a hippie expression when someone's in illusion. We always are Brahma, Brahm, and then after that comes Pramad. So Lord Brahmā, he's in the Pramad stage right now. He's total illusion. So the hippie expression is, get your head together, right? So what Brahmā did was, he got all of his foreheads together. Because normally, they're in 4 different directions, right? And the eyes are seeing in all, but this time, he got all of his foreheads together in one direction, and he bowed them down at Krishna's lotus feet. And the tears from his eyes, because by this time he knew he had lost. He was completely bewildered by Krishna. Tears in his eyes, bathing Krishna's lotus, his little lotus feet with the tears in his eyes, all of his foreheads at Krishna's feet. Now that's one description. Another description is he kept his foreheads together, but in all the 4 directions, because then, as the one head was bowing down, the other head could have darshan of Krishna at the same time. So the acharyas, they have so many wonderful ways of describing this pastime, and we'll hear more tomorrow. Hare Krishna. Any questions?
Prabhupada to pain. So we know that Haridas Thakur was beaten in a number of places, and Lord Chaitanya took that pain away from Haridas Thakur. Is that a similar situation with Srila Prabhupada and the pain?
The Kaviraj, he, as I said in the class, he had never seen anyone like Srila Prabhupada. And because an ordinary person would be screaming in pain because the bones and the skin have nothing in between them. Screaming in pain, he said. But Srila Prabhupada, and this also the Kaviraj couldn't understand, he said, sometimes there's high blood pressure, there's so many symptoms in his body when I feel his pulse, and then other times I feel his pulse and Prabhupada is perfectly normal, just like a healthy person. So the Kaviraj, who was practically the best that we could find in all of India, he could not understand Srila Prabhupada because Prabhupada was not manifesting the amount of pain that he should have been experiencing. No, he was translating, he was drinking milk, and the Kaviraj was completely bewildered by the activities of Srila Prabhupada. So some devotees claim that Prabhupada suffered. But Srila Prabhupada, and I looked this up because I didn't believe that, this Christian philosophy that Jesus is suffering for your sins, and as a matter of guilt, you shouldn't sin. No, it's not like that in Vaishnava theology. No, the spiritual master, if we break the contract, out of mercy, he'll come to save us. But it's not that he's suffering on our, we go on sinning and he gets all the suffering. That is not the Vaishnava philosophy. Srila Prabhupada had his pastimes with the Supreme Lord to prepare him to go on to his next mission, and whatever nonsense we might have engaged in, it didn't have anything to do with that relationship. At one point, when Prabhupada got sick here in 1974, he said that disease was a result because his leaders weren't following the four regulative principles. But it's not that he said, I'm suffering because of all of your sin. No, it's nothing like that. He's just very matter-of-factly, as Prabhupada always did things. He said, this is the cause and this is the result. Now you must all follow the four regulative principles if you want me to get better. So it's not material suffering as we experience. He's suffering out of compassion for us. That's why he comes back to pick us up, lifetime after lifetime, because we're nonsense.
His question reminds me of a story Guru Kripa used to tell. He was on the flight when Prabhupada went from Delhi to London, the last flight, in beginning of September '77. And, Abhiram was there, Krishna Kurs Maharaj was there. And it was a full flight. It stopped somewhere in Dubai or something like that. So during the flight, all the devotees, they just sat on the floor by the exit so that Prabhupada could lie down throughout the flight. And Guru Kripa, he was, like everyone, he was looking and seeing Prabhupada lying across the chairs uncomfortably, with sunglasses on, feeling so terrible. And then the plane stopped for the transit, for other passengers got off, some passengers got on. And Guru Kripa went up to Prabhupada, who was lying down across the chairs. And he said, Prabhupada, he said, is there anything I can do? Is there something I can do for you? And he saw Prabhupada, fluids coming through by the side of his mouth. And he said, and Prabhupada just looked at him and smiled and said, "You can get me a 7-Up." If I can tell, getting up this morning, I woke up this morning to a dream. Srila Prabhupada came, and he was in his, it wasn't here, it was not a room I recognized, a sitting room, but it was a large sitting room, and he was just sitting behind his desk. And there was about 2-3 dozen devotees all sitting there. And I was standing off on the side, and it was very quiet. Everyone was just chanting. And something went, and I thought, everyone has to leave. You know, this is what the servant would do sometimes. They would worry, it's time to go. No one wanted to go, but I managed to get everyone out against their wishes. Everyone was just fixed, looking at Srila Prabhupada. That's all he did. He didn't talk, it didn't matter, he just looked at him.
Yeah.
So then everyone was out, and then Prabhupada got up, and we walked out together outside his room, and it was just a hallway. And I wanted to say something, but it was so hard to talk because I was with him. And I finally said, "Prabhupada," I said, "all these devotees," I said, "they just look at you." I said, "and you've changed their life forever." And he just looked at me and he said, "Yes, that's true." And then I woke up. That's our Srila Prabhupada. He's changed all our lives.
You can see in Prabhupada's room his passport photo. He looks very grave. And one devotee once said to Prabhupada, "Prabhupada, you look very unhappy in that picture." And Prabhupada said, "No, that was the most ecstatic day of my life." Because he had gotten his passport to come to the West. So sometimes you can't understand the mood or what's internally going on with the pure devotee. Okay, Hare Krishna.